Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to another rousing rendition of what we like to call the BREADren podcast. And today is another uh, episode of Cocktail Convos, but just a little bit about who we got on today. I would like to introduce you to Mr. Elijah K. Lewis, a first-time author and a motivational speaker. I have met him via the illustrious Mother Tuskegee University. Met him recently at a alumni conference. So we're gonna get into some casual conversation with him. So we'll welcome him to the show and cheers to a wonderful conversation being had, gems being dropped, and knowledge being spread.
Absolutely. Cheers.
So we're gonna get into the book and the motivational speaking. But
Yep.
your jewels are in your journey. We're gonna talk about it. But what I also want to highlight is because this is what I love about a lot of everybody that we always have on here is people that are vastly multifaceted. With that being said, you are an engineer by trade, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so let's dig into that because from what most people's understanding of an engineer, it's high level thinking at a consistent pace, especially when you're in the industry, in the business, in the trade, and and you're a mechanical engineer. You also have a degree in cybersecurity, and so a lot of people would see that, be intimidated, especially at the fact that okay, he's doing that, and he also has the time and the discipline to add on two other things onto that, which also require high levels of thinking at a consistent pace, being an author and being a motivational speaker. But the first question that I want to ask to help you unravel all of that is being an HBCU double grad, Tuskegee University and Morgan State, how did the culture and the matriculation from those two historically Black institutions prepare you or guide you or inspire you to get to this point that you're at now?
Well, first and foremost, Mr. Woodson, thank you for having me on the podcast. It's an honor to be here. And yeah, to answer your first point, I think what both Tuskegee and Morgan did for me is that, I mean, one, they helped me get connected with a lot of great people. I don't attribute to my success by myself. It's always a team effort. So that was the first and most important thing. But also in regards to my career with NAVC with the Navy, Tuskegee was a big part of that because while I was there, NAVC gave me a scholarship and I was able to attend Tuskegee every year. And the basis of that was I would intern during the summer for them every year. And then I was able to get a full-time job with them in 2019 after I graduated from Tuskegee. But where Morgan comes into that is because when I wanted to do cybersecurity, there was a lady at Morgan named Miss Patricia Burgess. She was over the AMY program, which is Advancing Minorities Interested in Engineering. And she knew about the cybersecurity program called the MISI program, which stands for Master of Engineering and Cyber Engineering. And she was telling me about it, and she knew I worked for NAVC, and I thought, wow, that's really interesting. I would love to do that. So she told me about the program. I applied for it. I was able to get in, and being that I'd already had a full-time position at NAVC, NAVC was able to pay for my graduate studies at Morgan for that entire year. And not only that, I was still getting paid the whole time to learn and gain more knowledge. So really, I always say what both schools did was it was a lot of team effort. And as far as Tuskegee is concerned, with the Baltimore Tuskegee Alumni Club, not only with them helping out with my book scholarships and things of that nature, but there were certain alums that would call and just say, "Hey, how are you doing? Are your studies going okay? Do you need anything?" I always appreciate the fact that I was in a family environment at both HBCUs. And when I was in high school, that was always my only choice. I only wanted to go to HBCU. There's just something about that camaraderie, about being around our people that is great. Like you talked about that culture aspect. You just can't find that, no disrespect to the PWI, it's just not the same. So,
Right.
I always embrace that fact that it's always a family environment at HBCU. Even though despite, we may have our flaws, we still want to come together for the common good and help our students succeed. And what both schools have taught me is also how to give back and give the next individual, the students that are coming after me, that same opportunity that I've been given.
Most definitely. So now that we've got a little bit of background on that, now let's tackle the next title that you've added on, first time author. And how did that come about? Because, from the little bit of background that I've gathered, it wasn't on your radar. So tell us a little bit about how, you got a mechanical engineer, you've been to school twice, and met some amazing people that have helped you further your education. And now someone else gets inserted into your life that helps you come to this. But tell us a little bit about how that happened.
Well, it's always interesting. I love answering that question. Almost every interview I do, people say, "Yeah, how did you get into being an author and a writer?" And I tell them, like you just said, I had no plans of being an author. It was funny. About this time a year ago, I went to it was a Black Empowerment Expo by this group called Level Up, and it was in Waldorf, Maryland, which is where I currently live, and the reason I went was because the guest speaker was Dr. Umar Johnson, and I've followed Dr. Umar, and I've liked what he said, like what he says for the most part. I'm a big fan of his work. And while I was there, my publisher was selling his books because he's an author and motivational speaker himself. His name is Matthew C. Horn, and Matthew wasn't there at the table at the time I went to buy his two books. There was a sister there. And while I'm buying his books, she said, "Hey, come back after Dr. Umar speaks. Matthew will sign your books for you, and so on and so forth." So after Dr. Umar speaks, and I'm getting ready to leave, there's this part of me that says, "Do I really want to get Matthew to sign my books?" I mean, not saying I'm really pressed about it, but something in my spirit said, "Go over there, introduce yourself, let him sign your books, and just go on your way." So I do that, and as I'm signing the two books I bought, we're talking, asking some questions about his books, and I'm asking some questions about his book, and then he asked me this question. He said, "Hey brother, have you ever thought about writing a book? You got something on your mind." I'm just thinking to myself, like, no, I really wasn't planning to do that, because I hadn't written anything major since my scholarly project at Morgan. That was 2 years ago about that time. So
that's required work.
And that's required work, right? Because I just didn't think writing a book was something that I could do. I've had friends write books, and I think that's great, but I just didn't see that in me, because I thought, well, what do I talk about? How do I let the book flow? Is it going to make sense? I just didn't think that was something that I could achieve. But what I like about that conversation that I had with Matthew, and I said this in a couple previous interviews I've done, is that was a moment where he saw something greater in me than I saw in myself. And after a while, I said, "Okay, let's exchange our contact information. Hey, I follow you on IG. We did that." And while I was at work during the week, I just kept thinking, you know what? There are some experiences and a lot of life lessons that I've learned on my journey that I would love to share. I would love to help inspire people. Of course, us being Tuskegee graduates, one of the most famous quotes from Booker T. Washington is, "If you want to lift yourself up, lift up someone else." So I just felt like, okay, you know what? I think this is a great opportunity. This could be a sign of something big. Hey, let's give it a try and see where it takes me. So to wrap up the question you asked, really, I really came into writing by fortunate circumstance, but I'm so glad I took that opportunity, because like you said, as an engineer, I don't really tap into that creative side of my brain too much. I'm all about the logic or the numbers or whatever. So having that experience was definitely great, because it challenged me to do something new. And when I look back at it, not only can I say I've done that, but it was a way for me to step outside my comfort zone. And I see the results when people say, "Hey, I love your book. I appreciate what you said." And And it makes it all the worthwhile to know that someone in that particular moment saw something more than you saw in yourself.
You made two very interesting points that I just want to reiterate. Of one being you wanted to do something, or you were challenged to do something that's not part of, the everyday thing. And that's something that, a lot of people that are in professional jobs, period. If you got a job, you have a routine every day. You wake up at a certain time, you clock in, you do whatever your tasks are for the day, you clock out, you go home, you do it's all you get into a rhythm, and we're creatures of habit. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not until something or someone pushes you outside of that cycle that you can, kind of, it's kind of like we had an episode, I think the previous episode, where we talked about the importance of dreaming, where
Right.
it gives you that ability to leave your reality. The second point was that you said you didn't even think that you could do that. And that's one of the points that I want to point out about you is because I'm somebody that I've always said, jokingly and seriously, and different points of, I'm going to write a book. I'm going to write a book. I was going to write a book about certain experiences had just while I was working for a particular company, and in a particular industry, and then a couple of other topics. And I've said it for years, and it didn't get to a point until, maybe within the past 5 years, where I actually did it.
Mm.
And then, but and for me, it took years, literally. Talk a little bit about your timeline from that moment to when it's done and published.
Well, certainly. And to your point, the biggest thing that I've learned is just that you got to put yourself out there, and you really won't know what's going to happen until you do it. It's kind of like Nike's slogan, just do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just say it, it's just do it. You have to actually put in the work and see the results. But to your point, so yeah, I met Matthew on that Friday. It was at the MGM in Oxon Hill, Maryland.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I signed the contract. And prior to that, he said, "Hey, come up with some book titles for your book." And I had come across I came up with like 13 different titles, just trying to find something that would stick, that would grab the reader's attention. And he said, "Okay, that one's pretty good. That's good. You can try that." He says, "Okay, let me see the paper." So he writes on the paper, "Your jewels are in your journey, life lessons to lead you to your optimal self." And I look at it and I say, that's interesting. I didn't think of something like that.
Was
That
that was a combination?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I didn't think about that. I have to give him credit for that because I never thought of that particular title,
Mm-hmm.
but it made sense to me because when you think about it, what I tell everybody who meets me at a book signing is that we all have a journey to travel on. We all have a story to tell. But as we go about that journey, we have to have the right knowledge and perspective of how to be our best self. And when you go along the journey, you find those life lessons or those jewels along the way. So I think that's what made that title so unique for me, because I didn't think about it. But when I look back at it, it's something that not only I think grabs readers' attention, but it makes sense when you break the concept of it down. So that was September. So I started writing, and he also, I'm sorry, going back to September, a year ago, he gave me an outline of how to write your book and how to pretty much avoid writer's block, because people say, "Hey, what was the hardest part about writing your book?" And I tell them it really wasn't that much writer's block. I mean, the outline that he laid out was very precise. It was very easy for me to follow. And the beauty of it was, I think that's what's so great about having a person who's actually written books in your corner, who can say, "Hey, I can help you do this, I can help you do that," to make the process easier. Because I think for a lot of people, going back to what I said earlier, what scares a lot of potentially first time authors is that they're not sure how to write a book. Like, they're not sure. They probably know what to say, they don't know how to put it all together. And I
It's all
think
about
that's the advantage
it's all
of
about
having
prompting
someone.
yourself.
Say it again?
It's all about prompting yourself. When we're, in school, we're given a prompt, we're given a
Right,
topic of, hey, and I think that's also interesting to point out is that you started with a title first.
right.
And I think that, as another author, it's that I've never done that.
Hmm.
I've never done that. And, that's basically giving yourself a prompt to begin the process.
Right,
And
absolutely.
that's that's just one of the points that I'm personally going to take away for myself is, because, like you said, a lot of people have something to say, but they just don't know how to start it or maybe necessarily even finish it. And, the block comes from, trying to overcome those hurdles of, well, what do I say first? Because that a book has has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And depending on what
Mhm.
type, you need a climax, you need, if you're writing stories, you need all of these different elements. But I think, in your case, that's definitely something for anybody that's listening that is an aspiring author or a current author that's trying to get over the hump. I think that's very key to take away is, starting with the title first and using that as a creative prompt to get the conversation going with yourself to start getting that out. But I definitely wanted to point that part out. But in terms of the book, let's get into the book now. Your jewels
Mhm.
are in your journey, life lessons to lead you to your optimal self. Um, walk us through the book without giving too much away, because I definitely want people to buy this book, and we'll put the information in the description and all of that stuff, and we'll talk about it too. But walk us through the book and why people need it, because I also want to point out that I did not make it. I was not at the conference when you actually spoke, but you were one of the speakers. I think you opened up the conference, correct?
No, I didn't open up the. Well, I did help with the hospitality suite.
No, 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 no.
But
Weren't you like the first speaker on the
no, no,
schedule?
I never spoke during the conference.
Okay, I thought
I
they
was
had
a
you listed.
I was a vendor in the
I
conference.
got you.
That
Okay,
that's that's what I was doing. Yeah.
I thought they had you on the program. So, and that was one of the things when I got there, I thought that I had missed you, and I was like,
Hmm.
okay, I didn't get to hear you speak. But yeah, speaking of that, we'll get to that because I want to get to the motivational speaking part. But yeah, walk us through the book, and why people need it.
Well, the main focus of your jewels in your journey is going back to what I said earlier. Is that what I do is I give you 10 life lessons or jewels rather that I think are very important in life for us to be our best selves. And like I said earlier, it's about the fact that we have a journey to travel on in this life, but we have to have the right tools and the right knowledge to be our best self. So the end game of my book is that when you read it, you'll have that clarity and that perspective of how to be your best self using the jewels that are in my book. And that's not to say that I have all the answers, but I at least want to give my readers a starting point, because you might come across other jewels that were not in the book that you might want to apply maybe in your life and maybe want to share with people down the road yourself. But at least it'll give you some guidance as a starting point as you navigate on your journey to be your best self.
Point from that I want to take is that I think it's very key to point out that it doesn't seem like it was that much convincing for you to know and understand that there was value in your perspective, your journey, and what you've personally learned. It may not be for everybody, but you saw enough value in it to say, you know what, let me share this. And I think that is that's something that a lot of people struggle with, and that's something that a lot of people just don't do. It's like
Mm-hmm.
especially in I hate to sound like the old guy, but in this, it's social media where everybody's comparing themselves because of
Yeah.
what they see, and then it's just like don't nobody care what I think. Nobody cares. What I like, because I'm not this or I'm not that or whatever everybody's consistently seeing, and it's touted as being the thing. Or so I definitely want to take that part away of you saw value in just what this is what I got, and I'm sharing it, and I see value in it. The second title that you added on is motivational speaker. So when you wrote the book, were you already prepared to, like, what, because I've written this, or I'm going to write this book, I'm now going to go speak about this book? Or was that something that, snowballed into itself? How did that happen?
Really, no. Actually, at the time, my main focus was I was going to write the book and, like you said, put it out there. And I knew, like you said, like to your point earlier, I knew it, but I get everybody? No, but I knew I could at least get the right people.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my main focus, was just focus on being an author and sell my book and let the book do the talking for itself. But it was my publisher. He actually, prior to my book coming out, because I finished the book in March, and as he was going through the process with his team of editing and publishing the book, he says, "Hey, you kind of asked me, did I consider motivational speaking too?" And I said, "Okay, I'd be interested in that." So really, my main focus was really the author part more than motivational speaking. That just came up down the road. But I do like that because it can sort of tie into each other, because I see my book as a self-help motivating book. So it is cool to have the book speak for me. But I think at the same time, having that aspect of, hey, being a motivational speaker can somehow even enhance that even further, because now you can take the lessons that you learn from the book and even tie it from things that are not in the book and apply it to other aspects of life, or maybe situations that people are dealing with. And in a way, if people hear you speak, just about the book like I'm doing now, it might say, they might say, you know what, maybe I was on the fence with him about this book, or I hear what he's saying right there. You know what? Let me reach out and support the brother and see what he has to say, because in the end, I'm not saying I'm trying to convince people like, hey, you got to buy my book, but like to your point, I do have to put myself out there, because in order for people to see the value in something that you're trying to uh, promote, they have to see that you believe in the value of that yourself. In other words, if I don't show people that I don't believe in the work that I've created, how are they going to believe in my work if I don't believe in it? So I think that's the main advantage also being a motivational speaker, because I can demonstrate to my audience that, hey, not only do I want you to follow these jewels, I'm also following these myself to be better, because I'm still on that journey with you the same way. So not only do I want you to see the value in my work, I also see that the value in my own work myself. And I think that's the advantage of being a motivational speaker, is that you convince the audience that, hey, not only do I want you to believe in my work, I also believe in my work. And I'm going to walk the walk and talk the talk at the same time to be the best version of myself that I can be.
Most definitely. It also helps to keep, um, I kind of related to a little bit of, how every year there's a new volume or an edition of the same book that comes out, and it's just we go back and we edit it and we update it, and
Yeah.
and adding that aspect is you can always refer, like, hey, refer back to this book, because I can tell you more current things that have happened that still I'm applying these lessons to, and now you can give me real-time situations and I can apply the lessons to a real time. It basically just creates a more personal um, viewpoint from the book, and it also helps to keep it current. Um, so I definitely, and that's something that especially with that style of book, because most people that become motivational speakers, their books are very personal. It's almost like a memoir. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and now it's people are reading it for the details, and obviously the sometimes you write it from a viewpoint, then it becomes a personal story, but then this is the lesson I learned from it. But majority of the book is really based on the story, the details of it, and yours is more of a guide, and like, here are some lessons, and so and I think another thing that it's coming back to me now of just um your publisher had a guide to write
Mm-hmm.
the book, and I think that's something I think a lot of people um you know for one is the access, right, because
Yeah.
I've all of my books have been self-published. Do I like it? Sure, but uh, I think in the aspects of long form, you know it's one of those other hurdles for people where it's, hey, I got to do all of the editing. I got to do, I've got to do everything. So,
Hmm.
having the backing, number one, of a publisher who's also become a mentor for you, I think is something that is, in itself deserves, in my opinion, a new book to just break down, the lessons learned from that process, because that is something I think a lot of people um, may not have experienced. I've got a friend; she's an author, but she's also a publisher and an editor, and she's spitting them out, and hers are story based, but her discipline comes in where she sets goals for herself. So she's like, I'm going to type, you know, 250, 300, 500 words a night and things of that nature. And, she just has these sessions built in where it becomes a discipline level. So for you to take this book and put it out in such a and write it in such a short form, obviously, can be attributed to the outline given to you. But let's talk a little bit about the discipline that it takes to even finish, start, begin. All of this, like it still is a discipline to, okay, let me start and let me be consistent, because for 6 months you were disciplined and consistent enough to complete this outline. So let's talk a little bit about that, and I think that, and also, if you can, tie that into your background in engineering, because like you said, you're all about the numbers, the logic, and things of that nature. So that that industry requires a lot of discipline, especially working for NAVSEA. That's this.
Right.
So yeah, just talk a little bit about that if you can.
Sure. I mean, the writing aspect, I think one of the things Matthew told me was like, hey, at least try to write, at least a chapter and maybe start maybe a page or two into the next one. I couldn't always do that, whether it was work or something else. But usually what I would try to do is in the evening after I came home from work and I ate, I would try to do some writing, or at the very least do a lot of writing on the weekend when I have to worry about work. Or if it was during the holidays, I could do some time with that. Really, it's just, for me, it was all about using my time wisely. Now, I will say the good news is I didn't have a deadline to write the book, so I could write at my own pace. But I knew that, like I said earlier, just it's all about using my time wisely. So if I have time on my hands, hey, that's just the perfect amount of time to write the book, gather my thoughts, and not post and not what's the word? I'm trying to figure out the word. So on the tip of my tongue. Not postpone, procrastinate. There we go. Not
Gotcha. Yeah.
procrastinate. Because I think if you have a goal for yourself and you start saying, well, I'll get to it here or I'll get to it there, it almost never happens because you're just putting it off and you're not getting to it. You're not using your time wisely. And to tie it into the engineering aspect, I think really a lot of that comes from just the fact that, like I said, being an engineer is a very, I'm not going to, well, I can say to a degree tough, but disciplinary based major. So, you can't, be a slacker and be a great engineer at the same time. So I think it all,
big problems happen.
Say it again.
Big problems happen when engineers are slackers.
Absolutely, yeah. You study any disaster in the history of civilization, if the engineer was slacking at the job, hey, it was not a pretty story. It was not a pretty end.
Right.
But I think it's, like I said, it just boils down to me using my time wisely. And one of the things I talk about in my book as well is I give a lot of credit to my father, because I always say I get my work ethic from him. My father is definitely has always been a hard worker, always striving to be the best he can be, not only for himself, but also for me, for my mom, for our family. And I think watching him growing up, especially as a man trying to come into my own manhood, I always liked the way he approached work. He was always disciplined in his work ethic, things of that nature. So I credit my work ethic actually from him, because he's the person I watched growing up. In fact, one of the jewels I talk about in my book is have a great role model. And I talk about how much of a role model my father has been in my life. So when it came to writing a book, I knew that was a goal that, hey, I wanted this book to come out. I wanted to help a lot of people. So it just boils down to, hey, using your time wisely and know that, hey, if there's a time where you're not working, you're not doing anything else, hey, that's the perfect time to get on your book, because you also want to capitalize on your thoughts in the moment too. Because I think if you procrastinate, you lose some of the thought and some of the momentum that you've been gaining as you start writing. Because I think one of the things I noticed that the more I started writing, the more easier it became. Mm-hmm. And I also think because I was doing it at a very disciplinary pace, that I didn't lose any of my thoughts, or I didn't have too much of those writer's block issues, because I was always trying to be consistent in writing the book. And plus, I think the final thing of it is that I announced to people, hey, I'm writing the book. It's going to come out soon. I set a target for about spring or summer of 2023. I finished in March. It came out in May. So I also didn't want to hold people who were interested in my book, hostage by saying, hey, man, when's the book coming out? You've been writing on that for a while. Like, right. Is it coming? Like, it's still dropping, right? So, I think for my family, for my friends, and for the people who have supported me in buying the book, I also want to show that, hey, I appreciate you guys' time as well. So I'm not going to say, hey, I'm going to write a book and it takes me 5-6 years. I'm still on chapter 2. Like, right. I want to tell people, like, hey, I'm writing the book. This is how serious I am about it. And I'm going to take that time wisely to write as much as I can when I have that opportunity. And when I look back at the book, I like the results. I love the outcome. And I'm just glad I approached with that mentality, because if I decide to procrastinate or be sort of lackadaisical with it, then it's probably not as good as I would have liked it to be.
So now the sort of the final question becomes, especially since you've added on the title of motivational speaker, there is now an expectation, of sorts. And, I'm not sure. We don't have to know the details of your publishing contract, if you signed a deal where now you got to write 20 books, but there is an expectation now where people are going to want to, especially once this grows and grows and grows. And now it's like, okay, Elijah's the speaker, and now he's written the one book. We need another book, because when we see him, we already got this one. So
exactly, yeah.
Have you now set a new personal goal or a timeline of, it's time for the next one? Is this now that thing? Because sometimes it can be the first time author and then that's it for some people. And for some people that if you want to write one book and get it out and then you're done, that's you. But now that you've set on this path, do you have a new personal expectation or personal goal that you may have even once it was once it started, you already knew, like, okay, I'm going at least 5?
Well, that's a good question. I have had some thoughts about writing a second book. I still want to wrap my thoughts around what I want to say and gather that together. And to your point, I know I do want to take your jewels in your journey. I want to take this as far as I can, but I know that, to your point, we live in a what have you done for me lately society. So at some point, I do know that as big as I want this book to be, there is going to be somewhat of a ceiling at some point where it's like, okay, we've seen you promote this, we've seen you go to these events, but we want something new. It's kind of like how your favorite artists, when it comes to music, like, for example, they may have a great album, but at some point you want the art, you want to ask that artist, like, hey, you're going to drop something new? Like, that album you dropped 5 years ago was great, but it's 5 years later. Like, what are we going to get now? So, I mean, I want to take this book as big as I can, but I do want at some point look into maybe writing a second one. At least what I can say is that I have the confidence that I can do it, because I was able to do this for the first time. But what I tell people is, and one of the advice that I give to people who want to be an author is being genuine to yourself. And one of the things Matthew told me was about the writing process was, don't consider your reader, consider yourself. And what I took from that is you have to be genuine to yourself as a writer. If you don't feel passionate about a certain topic or a certain issue or whatever you want to write about, then that's a sign that says you should not write about it. Whatever you want to write about, like we talked about earlier, you're not going to get everybody, but the right people will come. Whatever it is, if it's nonfiction, poetry, self-help, a children's book, whatever, if you're passionate about it, you should go for it. But at the same time, I don't think you should, like the old saying goes, you can't rush art. So I think for me, at some point, I do want to get into maybe writing another book, but I have to know within myself when that time is right. I want to do it, but I think when the time is right, I'll definitely know when to do it, because the last thing I want to do for any of my writers is just put something out there just to hope it sticks, because I think intelligent readers can tell when you have a book that the author put maximum amount of effort into writing versus when you have a book that was just a finesse grab and trying to just, grab a couple of dollars and there was no substance behind it. So,
right.
Yeah, I think I want to take some time, keep going about my own journey, gaining some more experiences. And like I said earlier, I want to write another book. It's just knowing when that right time is to start the process. And I'm sure I'll know when. So whether it'll be a year from now, maybe 2 years, maybe it will be 5 years. I'm not sure. But definitely when I know the time is right, then I'll definitely, pick up my pen and, get back. As I guess some artists like to say, or some athletes like to say, get back in the lab.
I think it's something that caught me. You said is, it is important, and it sounds a way to some maybe, but I understand exactly what you said. Where you said you can't consider the reader. You got to consider yourself, especially when you're using personal anecdote or telling a personal story. Is if you're going to be authentic and be genuine about it, you can't, consider, oh, well, should I say no? This is what happened truly. And either you take it or you leave it. And I think that right there is another one of those humps that a lot of people can't get over, because they sitting there trying to figure out, well, how do I say this without saying this? And it's like, if you're going to tell us the truth, you just got to say this, because as long as it's the truth,
exactly,
you take it or you leave it. That's literally the only option. So I think that's very key and important. And my personal opinion is, I think you should. It sounds like you should write a book to help people write. It's like you got a lot of. And maybe the jewels in your journey, the second edition could be, lessons in writing a book, how to write a book, because a lot of what you've said, I think, is going to help a lot of aspiring authors and current authors of just, taking a different approach to the process of writing. And I personally also think that it goes across the genres. It doesn't matter whether you're writing self-help or, fantasy or sci-fi, just the process of writing and being creative is the ultimate thing. Is you have to stay true to yourself, and who it's for is who it's for, and they will find it. And, they always do. They always do. And we've seen it throughout history. If you want to find, Hammurabi's code, you go find it. If you want to find Confucius's writing, you go find Confucius writing. So it's it's there. If you want it, you will find it.
So if you build, it's like they were saying, if you build it, they will come.
Exactly.
But when it comes to writing, I like to put a remix on it. I say if you write it, they will read it. So those, like you said, those right people will eventually write your work, as long as they know that you're being genuine and that you're really passionate about it. The right people will come. And I want to go back real quick to what I said earlier. Don't get me wrong. I think to a degree, you should consider your reader too, because they are the ones reading the book. You don't want to put something out that's offensive or, going to rub people the wrong way. So I do want to clarify that at the same time. There is a part of me that would say, yes, you do want to consider your reader. However, I would say in considering your reader, don't lose your identity as the person you are, because when you do that, you're pretty much doing yourself harm. Like you said, you're not giving the writer your genuine self or your genuine work. So yes, you do want to consider the reader as far as what you do put in your writing, but do so to where you can still keep your identity as the person you are.
I definitely appreciate you for putting that disclaimer out. And our typical listeners are all professional people. So I always like to assume that we knew exactly what you was talking about when you said that,
Right.
because we are not encouraging people that are writing hate. If your writing is of a certain brow, it ain't even you shouldn't even be listening to this show, this particular episode, or anything associated with us at this point, because this is it has always been a platform of positivity, uplift, and being authentic to yourself in all aspects of your life. So with that being said, I definitely have to appreciate Mr. Elijah K. Lewis for joining us today with our cocktail convo. But before we go, tell our listeners where they can find you, where they can find your book. I know you're doing a lot of local events in the Maryland area. Like you're all over. It's not just Baltimore, Walt. You've been in a lot of places, and you're in a lot of events. Not where you may not necessarily be speaking. You're there. I'll say on your soapbox with your book, and you're telling people about it. And obviously me seeing you as a vendor, I love your setup. It's an inviting setup where it's just, you kind of got to say, what do you got going on? So tell the people where they can find you, where they can find your book. And for our listeners that are in the Baltimore, D.C. area, where they may be able to see you within the next week, if you got anywhere that you're going to be within the next week.
Sure. Well, first and foremost, again, Mr. Woodson, thank you for having me on the podcast. It was great. I enjoyed the experience. It was a great conversation with you. Yeah, if you want to find me as far as social media is concerned, you can definitely, for those of you who have Instagram, you can follow me at Melanin King Eli. That's my Instagram page, where you can see a lot of the events that I'm promoting or anything about my book. That's always a safe bet for you to follow me. If you want to order your copy of Your Jewels in Your Journey, you go to www.yourjewelsareInYourJourney.com. That's the website. I'm sure Mr. Woodson will put that in the description below. So you can click on that link. I'll get your order. You'll get your signed copy in the mail in a couple of days, and you get a chance to enjoy the jewels and see where the journey can take you. And as far as events are concerned, I do have a couple events. And it's funny, I was supposed to do an event tomorrow, but due to inclement weather, it got postponed. But that particular event is the outdoor vendor affair. It's in Mechanicsville, Maryland. If you're in that area, I think it's on 406. Let me just make sure I pull up the flyer, because I'm going to be incorrect when I say it.
Definitely get the address straight.
Yep.
Because we want people in the area to definitely show up, because a lot of the events that you do are very they're geared towards our people. Number one, absolutely. I do see you doing that a lot, so I definitely want to make sure that we get that we get that info out, because it's not just you there. It's a lot of impactful things happening at these events, and that's just from what I've seen. Since I've met you and started following you on social media, you're at a lot of events that got a lot to do with us. And it's, Black empowerment, Black achievement. I saw you did an interview with the Black Achievement Fund, and a lot of different, things that are being, that are impactful. So I definitely want to make sure that we continue to push that message, that what this brother has to say, and what he's always attached to is always almost like FUBU, for us, by us. But go ahead if you got the address.
Yeah, I do have the address now. So yeah, the outdoor vendor fair it's going to be postponed. The new date is going to be October the 7th on a Saturday. It's going to be from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. It's going to be on 40615 Kavanaugh Road in Mechanicsville, Maryland. If you're in that area, I'll be there on October the 7th. I'll also be, in fact, next Saturday, I'll have an event in Loveville, Maryland. It's going to be sundresses and cigars. It's going to be in Somerville Park. That's on 24590 Pittway in Loveville, Maryland. So that's another event. And also next Sunday, October the 1st, I will be, the event is called Poets in the Park. Funny, I don't have the flyer in front of me, so I'm sorry about that. But it is in the Baltimore area. I will be posting that on my social media, so look out for that. But I will be for that event on Sunday, October the 1st. In fact, I'll also be there with my mom, who's also an author. She's a poet. She's a first-time author as well. Her book came out. We're under the same publishing company, so my publisher has done a great job helping us out with some events to help sell our books. So we will be at that particular event together, selling our book at Poets in the Park. So definitely continue to follow my social media. If you're on Instagram or if you're on Facebook, my Facebook is Elijah K. Lewis. So if you're on Facebook or Instagram, you can follow for any upcoming events. And like I said earlier, just thank you so much for all the support you guys have given me. And again, get your copy today. And I'm looking forward to seeing where the journey may take you all in life. So thank you so much.
Most definitely beautifully put. Once again, I definitely want to appreciate you for taking a little bit of time out your schedule of being a triathlete currently in life. And I say that just based off the 3 titles that you professionally have. So definitely before we end, I definitely have to give a shout out to my 2 co-hosts on the BREADren. I'm sorry, y'all. This is a new thing for us. My 3 co-hosts, Miss Alicia Brandon of HBCU Pets LLC, Mr. Destrian Wells of D Wells Consulting, and Dr. Ajamu Loving, PhD CFP of Ajamu Loving on Money and You on Facebook. But you can follow us on all of our social media at BREADren Podcast Series on Facebook and at BREADren Pod on Instagram. That's BREADren spelled like bread because we always getting bread and we always talking about our bread. But hopefully you gathered something from this conversation, whether you're an author or not, that we've had with the author, motivational speaker, and engineer, Mr. Elijah K. Lewis. So with that being said, we love y'all and there's nothing you can do about it. Please tune into another episode. Peace.